Yes, we are live with the great Wendell Potter, who has been doing heroic work for years now, educating us, informing us on all things around healthcare and health insurance. And we used to talk all the time because healthcare was an issue all the time. Wendell, I don't think it stopped being an issue for millions of Americans every day, but it's still always good to talk to you. Thank you for joining us.
My pleasure, Pete. Thanks for having me back on.
What do you make of the sudden interest as a result of an assassination of a health insurance executive? I mean, how many interview requests have you gotten in the last few weeks, compared to the weeks before that?
Oh, it's been ridiculous. Countless. I really, honestly, did lose count. I've done every kind of media interview that you can think of over the past couple of weeks. And it just all of a sudden happened because you're right. We talked pretty frequently back in the day. And then the media's interest in healthcare just dropped and dropped off the earth. And then it's back again. And I think it's back sadly, because of this tragedy and the way that how the media works. It is covering not only the murder, but the continuing coverage is the outrage that people have been expressing online about health insurance companies in particular.
I do want to say, to save face from my own part, over these past years, whenever your folks reached out to me, whenever you had an article or a book, I never said no to talking to you. I'm always happy to talk to you. And that's part of the problem, that media only pays attention to the issues that are most relevant, that have a news hook so we can get ratings and do all the things that we do. But health care is a constant, like so many other issues that are important and impactful. So we need to be talking about it all the time. And I will double down and commit to doing that with you. A little bit of background, though, on you, just in case people aren't familiar with you. Used to be a big time executive at a big time company, Cigna Health Insurance. You're the head of corporate communications. So you took calls from reporters, journalists, and media people, and you crafted messages. Tell me a little bit more about what that job was.
Yeah, I was vice president of corporate communications. I look back, Pete, over that time, and I would say that probably a better title would have been vice president of propaganda, because I was a propagandist. I had been a journalist in my first career, and I always tried to be honest and straightforward, never to leave anything out, never to obscure important facts. But that's what I was being paid so well to do, much better than when I was a reporter, when I became a VP at a big insurance company. What I did, I handled financial communications, and that's among the many things that I did. My name was on all of Cigna's quarterly financial earnings reports for 10 years. So I had to know where the money came from and what the company did with it, how it rewarded shareholders, which is job number one, by the way. I also handle my team and I we wrote talking points for a lobbyist. I spent quite a bit of time in Washington. I worked with their trade associations to help craft PR and government relations strategies to try to kill any kind of reform ideas we didn't like. We had a pretty good track record. We beat most of those reforms back, including starting with the Clinton years. I'm that old and I go back that far. But that's what I did. And when I left, I've often said that I'm doing what I'm doing now, continuing to do it because I've got to make amends for all that I did during my 20 years working for the insurance industry. I saw too much.
Yeah, you certainly did. And that's why it's so important that we hear from someone like you all the time about this. You understand really intimately the way money works in politics, the way lobbyists work, and the necessity for some kind of campaigns finance reform, which I don't think we're going to see. Obviously, that's changed a bit, the way that it works over years since you were there. But you've worked hard to continue to cover this issue and continue to call for reform on campaign finance. When it comes to healthcare, health insurance, give us an example of how it works, because I think it's too simple and almost too cynical. I try not to be too cynical, thinking about the role that money plays, especially because Democrats would love that reform. We'd love to get money out of politics. And overall, Republicans and Democrats would like to stop having to make phone calls to try to raise money for their next campaign. They, generally speaking, don't love to take that money or to raise that money. Some of them might, but they'd love to have a standard, a public finance, if you will. We don't have that. How does it work, whether it's Republicans, whether it's Democrats, to get them to vote to institute something or, get rid of, deregulate?
I talk about this a lot, and I know that I was on your show when my second book came out, Nation on the Take, How Big Money Corrupts Our Democracy and What We Can Do About It. It is the biggest stumbling block to getting any kind of reform done, whether you're talking about healthcare or tech or the environment, whatever it is. It's all what is standing in the way of progress is money and politics. We need to have reforms. I think one of the worst things and one of the worst decisions ever to come out of the Supreme Court was the Citizens United decision around 2010, which essentially opened the floodgates of corporate money into our political system. At least there were some constraints before that. And what we have seen since then, companies like the ones that I work for have spent so lavishly on campaign contributions, on lobbying expenses, on, again, propaganda campaigns to influence elections and public policy. A lot of it is reported as campaign contributions, but a vast amount of it is in dark money that goes unreported that these companies can spend. And as a consequence, they're able to block important reforms and cause gridlock in Congress. It's one of the reasons why we have such a problem. And I think it is why we have a political system that has devolved to what it is now.
I feel like the triumph of healthcare reform, which was the Affordable Care Act, doesn't get enough credit and also doesn't get enough blame for what it didn't do. You've basically wrote a book about this. Again, I try not to be cynical because I really do adhere, especially when it comes to government and politics, to the idea that we can't let the perfect be the enemy of the good, especially in an atmosphere and a culture where we demand purity from our politicians. If we want to make things a little bit better, and in the case of healthcare, it'll save lives or prevent people from going bankrupt, or at least make their lives more comfortable if they can afford the drugs or treatment that they so badly need. And the Affordable Care Act created access for a whole group of people that didn't have it before. It made insurance companies have to spend a lot more of a percentage on the actual premiums on care versus advertisements or salaries, et cetera. It did so much more than that. You know what it did, and you know what it didn't do. But I still look at that as a huge triumph because of how close we got to not even getting that. Wendell, I mean, when I think about Senator Joe Lieberman, who works for the insurance state where so many of those companies, I think, are located in Connecticut, right? And the central role he played in killing the public option, which would have been a game changer, given access to consumers to a public, like Medicare for all almost, but a different insurer that would compete with all the privates. Tell me your thoughts, your postmortem. This much time has passed. What is it? 14 years since Obamacare passed?
Yeah, a little over 14 years. It'll be the 50th anniversary next year. Yeah.
Give me your thoughts on anything you want on what's changed. First of all, how was it a triumph, the Affordable Care Act, passing it, getting it through Congress, much less getting it past all the big safeguards and tyrants that are in the health insurance and healthcare industry?
It was a great triumph, President Biden famously said it was a big fucking deal, and he was right. But it fell far short as well too. But back to it being a triumph, it took the stars to align to get that across the finish line. As you know, it fell far short of delivering what we needed. But we had a huge problem of a growing number of people who didn't have health insurance. And a big reason for that was because insurance companies at that time were refusing to sell coverage to people because they'd been sick in the past because of a pre-existing condition, or they dropped them from coverage when they did get sick. So these companies were operating with impunity back then, as they are now in different ways. But at least the Affordable Care Act changed that. These companies can no longer blackball you because you've been sick. They can't charge you more for a policy because you have a pre-existing condition. And so it's brought a lot more people into coverage. But as you also said, it does not include the public option because the insurance industry knew they if they had one vote that voted with the Democrats to vote against it or to oppose that, they could get rid of it. And that's exactly what they did. Again, it's money in politics. They went to Lieberman and got him to say that he would not support the full bill if the public option provision stayed in there. And it was hugely disappointed. I spent so much time in Washington talking up the idea of the public option because it would be, as you described, kind of like a Medicare program for the rest of us. That would have been an option for us. It wouldn't have been the only option, but it would have been something we could have chosen. But the insurance industry saw that as a huge threat, and they pulled out all the stops to kill it, because the Democrats needed to have 60 votes to get it across the finish line in the Senate.
That's such a really massive point, the Senate filibuster, and the fact that they needed 60 votes was such a high hurdle. And I don't know how many ways we can say it to make it seem as impactful and important as it is. But the fact that that was necessary on this or any issue is such an important point. I didn't mean to interrupt you about that. More on the Affordable Care Act and what's happening.
But I'm glad you did, because it's notable. The stars had to align that way. We had to have 50 votes for it, and they were all Democrats with a few independents. And at that time, Lieberman was an independent who caucused with the Democrats. We have not had that kind of those kind of numbers since then, and it's not likely we will anytime in the near future.
To be clear, the history, just to be clear, I think we're saying, I want to make sure separating it. You needed 60 votes to get that public option. Yes. The Affordable Care Act itself was passed using reconciliation, right?
That's correct. That's correct. But the public option was what was necessary.
Okay. Yeah.
And Lieberman had thumbs down, and so
it was crazy when he died. This past year. I mean, so many assholes who remembered that made that comment about that's what he will be best known for. And a lot of people also make a opposite comment of John McCain, because John McCain in the Senate was the vote that prevented the Affordable Care Act from being repealed. Do I have that right?
That is correct. That is correct. And on the House side, by the way, the version of the Affordable Care Act passed late in 2009, but it was not until March of 2010 that the ACA passed the Senate. But you're right. It almost got wiped out during the Trump years, and it survived once again by one vote. By the way, you may recall it, if I told you this or not, but during some appearances that I made when I was testifying before Congress during that debate on what became the ACA, I said if they passed the bill without the Affordable Care Act, they might as well call it the Health Insurance Industry Profit Protection and Enhancement Act. It passed without the public option. And Pete, the profits of these companies they've just skyrocketed in recent years.
So that's the craziest thing about this, is that it gets demagogue. This is the most frustrating thing about our political conversation, because on the right, they so often point to a problem that's happened, but they blame it on all of the wrong causes to hide the real truth. And in this case, they were saying the Affordable Care Act was socialism and would lead to all kinds of horrible things. But it was always Mitt Romney's conservative idea, or an idea that came out of a right-wing think tank, which was a free market solution to give more access to insurance to health insurers, right? It was the ACA created exchanges that allowed health insurance companies to get subsidies from the government so they could make more money. And in the chat, that's why I love that we're doing this live, Benny Alexander writes, the Affordable Care Act has led, as you just said, Wendell, to record profits for insurance companies, and they still are aggressively inventing new ways to fuck over patients. So maybe we talk about what his comment is. What has transpired in the time since it passed? How has the health insurance industry, specifically the insurance industry, gotten around this and made record profits for their shareholders? Because they're always one step or 10 steps ahead of government regulators of any level, much less journalists.
They have, and they've done it through, pardon me, through consolidation. They've the big companies have bought smaller competitors, but they've also in recent years got into healthcare delivery. It's called vertical integration. So they're not just health insurance companies anymore. They've bought physician practices and clinics. and they're deep into pharmacy benefits. In fact, 3 big companies, including Cigna, where I used to work, control 80% of the pharmacy benefit market. And they determine how much you pay when you go to the pharmacy counter for your medication, or whether you'll even get it at all, how much you have to pay out of pocket for it, and whether it's even listed on their list of drugs that they will even cover. They've gotten that powerful and that influential. They've also worked around the requirement that in the ACA that they spend at least 80 or 85% of our premiums on our care. They've gotten around that largely because of what I was talking about, this vertical integration. By buying physician practices and clinics and getting into healthcare delivery, that's exempt from that provision of the Affordable Care Act. It's called the medical loss ratio. Insurance companies consider it a loss when they pay a claim. So they're working around that, and perversely, it has given them even less of an incentive to control healthcare costs, because just as a cost of a stay in the hospital goes up or prescription medication goes up, they just jack up their premiums because they're the only game in town. There is no public option. Employers feel like they have no option except to work with these big guys. And so we've seen that happen, but they've also saddled us with more and more cost out of our own pockets before our coverage kicks in. The ACA addressed that to a certain extent, but they set the limit for out-of-pockets way, way too high. Now, this year, a family could be on the hook for $18,900 out of pocket before their coverage kicks in. That's unconscionable. American families don't have that much money in the bank to pay for an unexpected medical bill or for someone who's got a chronic condition. And they have put barriers in place that make it more difficult for us to even get approval for the care that we need. It's something called prior authorization. So these companies, I've always said, the one thing these companies know how to do is to make money. And regardless, it seems, of what legislation you pass, they figure out some ways to work around it. As long as we allow them to run our healthcare system, it's going to be that way.
It's really hard to stay ahead of them, to be fair, but not as hard as it might be for any number of other industries, like tech industries and so on, that are really hard to understand. This stuff is not that hard to understand if you're a health insurance, healthcare expert, or much less a doctor who has to run an office and have to deal with all of this paperwork all the time. So I guess in a couple minutes I have left, I mean, where do you see us right now when it comes to health policy in America? Where are the health insurance companies in terms of lobbying in what they want, given the fact that Donald Trump is going to be president, Republicans are going to be in charge of that, the House and the Senate? What reforms, if any, do you see getting through if everybody's on the take or doesn't see this as an issue needing reform? You know, I do remember when Obama got elected in 2008, he ran on healthcare. And one of the things I remember was really impactful is, I think it was definitely at the DNC. He had like people that were former Republicans that said, I'm now voting for a Democrat because of some healthcare nightmare or another. And so it's not like Republican Americans, conservative Americans, don't have the exact same nightmare that we do. And I can make the case that conservatives should be a lot more concerned about this. If you have that entrepreneurial spirit and you want to go out on your own, good luck affording health insurance for you, much less an employee. So what do you see happening with Trump and these Supreme Court decisions that are going to allow so many kind of other things to happen, and in industries to not be regulated, perhaps as a result of the Chevron decision or as a result of RFK being the head of HHS? I mean, what do you see happening, changing, if anything?
Well, you know, it's possible that there could be actually some meaningful reforms during the Trump years. We'll see.
What? Great.
It's possible.
Great.
What we're seeing right now, Republicans, a lot of them are really upset with insurance companies because of these pharmacy benefit managers I mentioned. A lot of them are pharmacists and doctors. They hate these companies now with a passion. So you've got that dynamic. I know that because I've actually met with some of them in recent weeks.
You're talking about Republican congressmen specifically. I know one of which is was a pharmacist. You're talking about actual voting members of the Republican caucus in the House that want reform specifically here. Is that what you're saying?
That's exactly right. In fact, some very important reforms are in this so-called continuing resolution that Elon Musk and now Trump are saying they don't like, that
Yeah.
was voted on so that by tomorrow, or the government's going to shut down, is ready to go. And if it doesn't happen now, I think it will happen next year. And I
There's
think
something in that. I'm sorry. There's something in that funding bill that would affect pharmaceutical benefits.
absolutely, it would,
Wow.
it would give us a lot of relief, because it would change the way these companies do business in a very meaningful way. So we'll see if that stays in this final bill that ultimately is passed, if it ever is. But if it's not passed, it'll be an issue once again for up for debate next year. It has broad bipartisan support, as does a lot of support for this other barrier I mentioned, prior authorization. People, these members of Congress are hearing from their constituents in ways that they haven't before. People are mad; they really are mad, and I think constituents will have some sway with these members of Congress, maybe some next year. We'll see.
Do I have this right? Before I let you go, fact check something for me. During the Affordable Care Act fight, one of the things that became a real talking point for Republicans was that they wanted to make sure that in the bill there was a law that prevented undocumented people from buying health insurance policies.
Yeah.
Do you remember that?
Oh, I do. It became a part of the bill, and as a consequence, if you are undocumented, to this day, you cannot buy health insurance in this country.
Because I want to make the case that I hate. I'm an American who hates undocumented people. I hate illegal immigration. I don't want any more of those people here. But I do want them to be able to, if they are here, I want them to be able to buy stuff. I want them to come to my restaurant and get takeout. They're more likely delivering it, and I'm not paying them a fair wage, much less insurance. I want them to come to my store and buy whatever I'm selling. I want these undocumented people to buy things with their hard-earned money that they're making here in America that I'm selling. And as a health insurance company, I definitely want them to buy my policies. So the health insurance companies want them to buy, especially if they're healthy, young people. But and as a conservative who's against these people, I don't want to pay for their health care in the emergency room. It's going to fall on me if they don't have health insurance. Wouldn't it be in the anti-immigrant conservative Americans' interest and the insurance company's interest to allow, in fact, support and promote undocumented people or anybody to buy a health insurance policy? It's just an insurance policy so that I don't have to pay for them.
You're so right. It was such an ill-informed provision that the Democrats felt they had to go along with. But you were exactly right. These people are in the country. They do get sick. They do use healthcare services. Many times they can't pay for it. So the rest of us pick up the tab. There's no such thing really as free healthcare. They may not be able to pay their bill, but hospitals and physician practices, they increase their prices to compensate for what is referred to as uncompensated care. And that's where that falls. Somebody has to pay for it, and the people who are paying for it are us, whether we're Democrats or Republicans. It makes no sense. It was really misguided.
Really appreciate talking to you today, catching up with you, and let's try to make it a regular deal. I will commit to doing a health care segment at least once a month with you or anybody you suggest. I've got a whole bunch of guests that join me all the time, obviously. Such an important issue, and I always want to cover it and talk about it and learn about it. We are so uniquely American on this issue. And just on that, last word, difference between our system and any that you want to pick in the rest of the world. What would you say?
We're so different from any others. The Commonwealth Fund does a study every year about health systems abroad. We spend twice as much on average as any other country on the planet, but our outcomes are far worse. We can learn from these other companies, other countries.
Yeah,
we must.
We spend more but die more, or we spend more but go bankrupt more. We spend more but get better outcomes, and by almost every metric, it would seem. It's an insane statistic, and the most important statistic. If it were anything else, we would be, demanding change, and hopefully we will continue to. All right, I'll let you go. Thank you so much, Wendell. Really appreciate you being here. Let's talk again soon.
We'll do it. Thank you, Pete.
All right. You can hit the red X at the bottom and leave while I awkwardly stay here with people. You look good, by the way, Wendell. He looks good. Looks good. I think he's 67 years old. Look good. Handsome guy. right? Got that turtleneck rocking. That was great. Thanks for those of you that watched live and for the comments. I'm learning how to do this and how to include your comments. I just don't know why Ray wrote in his comment that he's in line to buy gas at $2.72 at BJ's. What does that have to do with our conversation, Ray? Was that analog somehow to health insurance? What did I miss? And why did I just use the word analog? Am I watching Chris Hayes too much? All right. Oh, good. Gareth was there. Thank you very much for watching. I am going to end the stream now, and I appreciate you guys supporting me here. And let me know if it worked, if it didn't work, where you watched, and what I can do better. Love ya. Happy Thursday. I'm hosting a hangout tonight for paid subscribers. Go to patreon.com/Pete Dominick and sign up right now and be a part of our amazing community, some of who were joining this live stream. Thank you guys. Love you. Bye. Peace.